What's up, guys? It's Dr. Murphy with Murphy Medical Associates and our team at coronatestct.com. Today is the 15th of March, the middle of the month, match day for all of those wonderful residents out there. It is also 2 days away from St. Patrick's Day, so we got a little bit of the green on just for you. Well, I want to talk a little bit today about something that so many people neglect, and I never thought at first my worlds would collide. My worlds would collide so aggressively until I found out that my board certification in weight loss and obesity medicine would come so heavily to play, no pun intended, on this coronavirus pandemic. What's that? You're overweight? You better lose it, because it can save your life. Obesity and COVID-19 today for you on Murphy's Medical Minute. Stay tuned. All right, guys, one of the things that I want to go over with you today, put simply, is that we've had a pandemic of obesity for decades. And I would lecture on this in the medical schools over and over again. We live in what we call an obesogenic environment. Obesogenic environment. What does that mean? We have a massive amount of dense calories available to us. Most of those dense calories never fill us up. So we go on to eat and eat and eat more. When I first discovered weight loss, I was overweight and I had my blood pressure climbing in the office. So I had my nurse take my blood pressure. For me, it was 140s. Now, normally my blood pressure runs 110s. And I was just completely exhausted and fatigued. But it wasn't until 2 years ago where I discovered intermittent fasting that I was really able to help my patients the most with weight loss. And I've been hosting weight loss for my medical practice, curing, literally, I don't like to use the word curing, but putting diabetes in complete remission. And what happened? I was able to drop medications. And with our ultrasound scans, we were able to see atherosclerosis in your carotid and your blood vessels go away. It just disappeared. We didn't see atherosclerosis. We did not see cholesterol problems. It was, put simply, amazing. It was just an amazing, amazing feat of everything. Is we just didn't, we saw diseases melt away. We saw diseases melt away. And that's because obesity is such a deadly metabolic disease. When you add obesity and COVID, though, you get a sure killer. You get a sure killer. Here, let me show you a little bit about it, right? We're going to get started here. We'll get started here. All right. Welcome to Murphy's Medical Minute and the COVID-19 co-pandemic with obesity. Man, we were ill-prepared to have a pandemic, but our obese nature of our nation here in the United States made us uniquely ready to die from COVID-19. So who was dying? Who were the countries that were dying from COVID-19? You can take a look over there at the slide deck that we have. And first off, most important caveat, we have lies, damn lies, and statistics. What does that mean? When we look at statistical data, we can be confused, especially if we don't have enough statistical data out there. If we don't have enough data, just like in this pandemic, we can be confused with things. But as we get more data, we are able to understand things better, right? What we know here is there are multiple countries that are dying from COVID-19. COVID-19 mortality lines up. Take a look over there. It lines up, albeit not perfect, it lines up with obesity. In the United States, we saw a bunch of that. So what do we have? We know that if you are obese, if you are overweight, it is going to increase your risk of hospitalization. It's going to increase your risk of ICU care. And we've been much better at taking care of people and lowering ICU mortality. In the very beginning, ICU mortality was like 80%. It's like 80%. Now we have ICU mortality at a much lower rate, However, we still have increased risk. And perhaps the most dreaded risk here is going on the ventilator. If you go on the ventilator, there's still a very high risk using mechanical ventilation that you're not coming off. Unfortunately, one of my lab techs, her mother-in-law is being placed on a ventilator today, and she asked me, what are the odds? And I told her, not very good. Because once you have to use a mechanical ventilation strategy with a ventilator, your lungs are ravaged. The inflammation is there. We know that there's an increased risk of death. Unfortunately, her mother-in-law is obese. So we know that there's a 48 to 62% increased risk of death from obesity. What we don't know yet is whether it increases the risk of long COVID or not. But I can tell you this. I think it does. Observationally, in the thousands of people that we have had with COVID and the hundreds of people that we have with long COVID, it tends to trend women and overweight status. Those tend to be the trends for long COVID here. Okay? So how does obesity kill? How does obesity kill? Obesity kills by creating inflammation. Sorry about that. Obesity kills by creating inflammation. That inflammation leads to disease problems that we see throughout the course. These disease problems include, let's see if I got a little slide here for you. Right? They lead to problems like cytokine changes. One of the big things we looked at was cytokines, IL-6, CRP. If you're overweight, those chemicals automatically go up. In fat cells, we call them adipokines. We see a response where we have more interferon gamma and tumor necrosis factor alpha. These lead to worse inflammation, leading to an increased clinical manifestation, increased mortality, increased ICU stay, increased hospitalization. But what's even more concerning about it is, will obesity reduce the effect of vaccination? And that's currently underway. We know that obesity increases your risk of becoming a super spreader and to have worse outcomes. We wonder if perhaps viral burden is related to this. One of the best things you can do is reduce your weight. Get your weight under a BMI of 35. You can go on any calculator on the web and the internet. CDC has a calculator. We need to reduce the BMI burden below 35 and ideally below 25. But we know your risks really skyrocket when you have a BMI above 35. The risks magnify massively. And so one of the big problems we have is that kids are gaining weight. If we thought our adults were at risk, our children are at even greater risk. And this is, put simply, one of the biggest dangers that we face today. I'm all for kids being in school. End of story. There's nothing better for children than to be able to be in school. In school they can learn. In school they can socialize. In school they can maintain a healthy weight. And one of the things we've known for years now is that kids gain weight, not in school. They don't gain the weight in school. They gain the weight during summertime. During school, kids maintain a healthy weight. During the summer, kids gain weight. What do you think these lockdowns were? Necessary to prevent spread, certainly, and I would agree with that. However, the outcomes, the downstream effects include weight gain in children. And I just talked about the fact that when you gain weight, when your BMI increases, you're at risk of disease, far more risk of dying of COVID than not. And now we know children will do well in the majority of cases of COVID. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be a panacea. It definitely won't. If anything, what we're going to see is, put simply, children will recover, provided they didn't gain a lot of weight. We will see long COVID in children. Will it be the rate of 10 to 30% like adults? We don't quite know yet. And I'm going to cover that in another episode later this week. I'll probably review on Friday the risk of long COVID and kids. But right now our kids are sitting ducks. Even if we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. Even if we open the schools, if there is no ventilation plan and there's no testing plan in place, the kids will get COVID. So either we let the kids gain weight by locking down and doing remote school, or we bring them back to school and expose them to COVID risk. But going back and forth between them is really a recipe for disaster. They stay home for 2 weeks, they gain weight, they go back to school for 2 weeks, they're exposed to COVID. And we don't have a vaccination strategy for the kids yet. We really don't. We don't have a vaccination strategy for the kids yet. And part of that is the magical thinking that was led for the last year about children not getting COVID. And this is mind-blowing. In what world do children, are they magical creatures? Well, they are magical creatures, but they're not immune to COVID. One of the big problems is kids get tested less. Another problem is that kids have less viral burden in their nose. And so they're only positive for a few days. And in fact, anal swabs are better to use in kids, but you're not going to get that in school. So we have a minimal unified surveillance testing plan in schools. Having school in session helps children stay healthy. It helps children maintain a healthy weight, because in lockdowns or in summertime, they're going to gain weight. Don't believe me? Guess what? We looked at the first lockdown and the children's behavior in lockdown in Italy. What did they eat? They ate more chips and soda. They had increased consumption of sugary drinks and starchy snacks. They had an increased weight gain risk going into lockdowns. We knew that this was going to happen in 2016. So, why? Because we had the school versus summer data. We had the school versus summer data, which indicate that children gain weight in the summer. Children gain weight in the summer. Even with activity, children gain weight in the summertime. More importantly, we know that children's screen time increases in the summertime. Perhaps screen time plus drinks equal problem. Well, we found out in Italy. Sedentary kids gained weight and had reduced activity during the lockdown. In addition, in Italy, the screen time quadrupled. The screen time quadrupled. So we are going through cycles of opening up and closing, leading to weight gain and then exposure to COVID. We're setting ourselves up as adults. We're setting ourselves up and our children up for risk with COVID, for risk for bad outcomes. These risks are real. And don't get me wrong. I don't think we should have bars open right now. I personally don't think we should also have bowling alleys open right now. I think poorly ventilated bowling alleys are basically restaurants and bars mixed together with an excuse to talk very loud because you have pins being dropped. You have groups of people together, and there's nothing wrong with groups of people together outdoors in properly ventilated spaces while the burden of disease is low. But one of the worst things we can do is put obese patients indoors having to talk in loud voices. It's just not a recipe for health. And unfortunately, our kids are at risk here. Our kids are at risk here. So what I want you to remember is the following. The United States has a very high mortality rate with COVID. The United States has a very high obesity rate. The United States has a very high seed and vegetable oil consumption rate in the United States. These magical criteria put together increase our inflammation, reduce our ability to fight off disease, increase our risk of going into needing a mechanical ventilator, something to breathe with us, increase our hospitalization risk. They increase our risk of ICU care. And we're throwing our kids down the gauntlet. We're throwing our kids down the gauntlet, hoping that quadrupling of screen time, increased exposure to chips and soda are going to make them be able to magically not get COVID. What are we thinking? What are we thinking? On Friday, I'm going to talk about long COVID in kids. There are so many issues here that I can't even begin to really go through it, other than the following. Put simply, our bodies are made to be well. When we poison them with vegetable oil, starches, and simple carbohydrates, our bodies break. That breaking leads to fat accumulation on our body, and right now we know that insulin goes up before fat comes on. Insulin is an anabolic steroid. It's an anabolic hormone that tells us that winter is coming. If we keep spiking our insulin levels, we keep telling our body to prepare for hibernation. As we prepare for hibernation, we produce fat cells on our body that lead to inflammation, which is one of the big drivers of post-COVID syndrome. It's one of the big drivers of lung damage from a COVID infection. One of the biggest drivers of death from COVID, which if you're obese, you're between 48 and 62% more likely to die from COVID. Obesity was the pandemic until COVID came in and bumped the elephant into the corner of the room. Obesity needs to be treated aggressively prior to a COVID infection. If you are overweight or obese, you need to lose weight to save your life. COVID has just exacerbated it. COVID-19, SARS CoV2, has exacerbated the need to treat obesity. The best thing you can do during this pandemic is lose weight. You can do it. I'm going to show you how. There are lots of guys on here that can, gals on here, that can show you how to lose weight. And the key for weight loss is reducing your insulin levels. Your fasting insulin levels should be a single digit. They should not be a double digit, it should be a single digit. If your doctor doesn't order fasting insulin levels on you on your physical, you need to ask for it. Number one. Number two, you need to drop those insulin levels. The way that you do that is you reduce your insulin spiking by reducing how you eat. You should never eat for fun. You should eat for hunger. And when you have hunger, you should try water first. A full third of all hunger is just thirst. Weight loss will save your life. We are failing at keeping our kids healthy. We are failing at keeping our kids a healthy weight. Why is that any surprise? Americans are failing at keeping ourselves healthy weight. That's due to our obesogenic environment. That's screen time, just like now. You're zombified on the YouTube. It's one of the worst things I can do, I guess, is make YouTube lectures that everyone watches. Maybe if you get on the treadmill while you watch, it'll be a better way to go. But I'm here to tell you right now, the best thing you can do to lose weight is not exercise forever. It's to drop your insulin levels. Dropping insulin levels is exceedingly difficult to do in the United States because we have an obesogenic environment. We have an obesogenic environment driven by a food industry determined to make us eat more. Determined to make us eat more. So we have to fix that. And I can tell you right now, one of the best ways to fix the obesogenic environment is to demand better food. Demand better food. And what is better food? Better food is food that's normal, that's natural, that's of the earth. Food that is not processed. If you can get rid of processed food, you're going to do a lot. You're going to do so much better. You're going to do so much better with life. Make your own food. Make your own food if you can. If you can't make your own food, choose food that's going to be minimally processed. This is before we talk keto or vegan keto or high fats or high proteins. Before you even look at macronutrients, stop eating out of boxes and bags. Stop eating out of boxes and bags. It'll save your life. It'll save your life. Today is March 15th, 2021. 2 days until St. Patrick's Day. Am I going to have a boiled dinner? You bet I am. But am I going to eat potatoes and corn and, potatoes and carrots? No. Corned beef and cabbage. Corned beef and cabbage, my friends. That is a boiled dinner. Many an Irishman has gone blind from diabetes eating potatoes. Trust me, I know as a kid we had like 7 types of potatoes. Salt potatoes, red potatoes, baby potatoes, boiled potatoes, baked potatoes. The little gold ones, the little small ones, oh yeah. Weight gain comes before obesity. And obesity comes before death from COVID. Weight gain happens after your insulin levels spike in your body. Drop your insulin levels, raise your likelihood of surviving COVID. Raise your likelihood of not getting long COVID. Drop your insulin levels, increase your lifespan, reduce your risk of heart disease. But raise your insulin levels, raise your risk of death. We can dance around macronutrients and all sorts of crazy stuff, but right now it's pretty crystal clear. Increased insulin will give you cancer. Increased insulin will give you heart disease. Increased insulin will give you obesity. And increased insulin will increase your risk of dying from COVID-19. Our bodies are made to be well. We need to feed them well. We need to treat them well so they can be well. We see here with the data in the review that lockdowns increase children's risk of obesity. Their behaviors tend to increase their risk because they eat more chips. They drink more sugary drinks. Their screen time quadruples. I'm not one to say don't lock down. Trust me, I've talked about the variants and the E484K mutation that scares me, let me rephrase the word. That concerns me. Not a lot scares me, but it concerns me deeply. Concerns me deeply. Looking at the global data of obesity and the global data on mortality with COVID, it's pretty crystal clear. If you are a nation that has a lot of COVID and a lot of obesity, you're going to be a nation that has a lot of death. With half a million deaths so far in a year, we are fools not to treat obesity. We're fools. But Dr. Murphy, we're going to destroy another industry. We're going to destroy potato farmers and corn farmers and soybean oil. Those industries destroyed us first. Sorry. I grew up on a dairy farm. We have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be honest with ourselves. Do we want health or do we want wealth? Our bodies are made to be well, but if we continue to choose wealth first, we're nowhere better off than we were when we started this thing. This is Dr. Murphy, Murphy Medical Associates, and my team at coronatestct.com, taking care of the tri-state area. We are here for you. You need to be there for you. Eat well, exercise, get sun, be well. We are made to be well. Treat our bodies right. And the best thing you can do during this pandemic is lose weight. It'll save your life. It's Dr. Murphy telling you all, thanks for tuning in. I love you. Stay safe. Be good to each other. Remember, we are made to be well.
With